Well, is the presentation is visible and am I audible? All okay?
Yes, yes, all okay.
Okay. So let's start. Today's webinar, we will learn about the emerging technologies for detection and removal of microplastic in wastewater treatment plant. So basically, this topic consisting mainly of an environmental issues regarding the microplastic. This presentation mainly based on three parts. That is, number one is introduction of microplastic. That is, what do you mean by microplastic? What are the classification of it? Second one is the detection of microplastic. That is, how to detect microplastic in the environment. And third one is the how to remove the microplastic from the environment as well as in our sewage treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant. Okay. So firstly, in the introductory part, we will go through the definition of microplastic. What is it? So microplastic are one sort of plastic particles, but of smaller size. So basically, plastic particles having size less than 5 mm are called as microplastic. So these also become a growing threat. This also becomes a growing threat like plastic. This can be present and harmful to aquatic species. They can be present in drinking water, that is plastic water bottle, or they can be present as air pollutant in our air environment. Okay. So basically, we are eating, drinking, and breathing microplastic unknowingly. So massive usage of these plastic products due to urbanization and inappropriate disposal method of plastic products or plastic waste leads to this kind of formation of microplastic. So now we come to the next part, that is different types of microplastic. What are the classification of it? So there are mainly two perspectives based on which we may classify microplastic. Firstly, we will classify according to the source of it. That is, from where these microplastics are generated, or on the basis of the source of microplastic, we can classify as primary microplastic and secondary microplastic. Now, primary microplastic are those which can be directly released into the nature as small particles. Now, for example, you may take personal care or beauty products, or like facial scrubs. These are basically directly mixed with wastewater and discharged into river, lakes, ocean, etc. Okay. Now there are certain tires which turned into small particles due to abrasion and can pollute the environment. Okay. Next example is the washing of synthetic clothes. Basically, there are some small fiber-like microplastic which basically mixed with wastewater and at the end discharged into the river or lakes, etc. And as a result, contaminated it. Okay. So this type of microplastic that I am talking about, that is primary microplastic. This type of microplastic accounted for around 19 to 31% of overall microplastic found in ocean. Now come to the second type of microplastic, that is secondary microplastic. These are formed by erosion of large plastic debris through exposure to certain environmental factors such as water, wind, and sunlight. So these are basically disintegrated form of primary microplastic. Okay, so this type of microplastic accounted for around 69 to 80% of overall ocean plastic debris. Okay, so these smaller microplastic, that is these secondary microplastic, these are often consumed by the marine elements. Okay. Next, next type of microplastic is based on the shape and size of microplastic. So there is this perspective of classification of microplastic that is according to different shape and form, where you can see 6 type of microplastic. That is, number one is fiber just having the longer length than its breadth. Number two is there is pellets. So pellets are basically circular or rounded structure like microplastic. And third one is film. Films are having a smaller thickness and larger area. Then the next one is fragments. So fragments are basically irregular shaped microplastic. Uh, Next one is foam. Foam is basically a mass of small, usually white bubbles formed on surface of liquid. And the last one is microbeads. So microbeads are basically smaller in the microplastic group. Okay. So these are basically less than 1 mm. The microplastic, the size range is less than 5 mm, but microbeads are basically even much more smaller. Okay. These microbeads can be manufactured by in certain polyethylene or certain petrochemical plastic products. That is the source of it, this microbeads actually. Now, coming to the next part, that is the effects of microplastic in ecosystem. Sorry. The effects of microplastic in ecosystem. So this figure you have seen there, this picture basically depicts the overall cycle of microplastic. That is how they are generated by different human activities and how they eventually incorporated in our body. Okay. So here we can see different man-made activities like washing of clothes, use of cosmetic products, abrasion of tires, water bottles, plastic bags, uh, due to which microplastic is generated and submerged into the ocean actually. Now this microplastic basically consumed by different aquatic animals in ocean, and whenever we consume those aquatic animals as our food, as those contaminated seafood, then this basically enters into our blood circulation. So this is the all over effect, which you can see how our waste product come into our body. Okay. In a circulated manner. Next, we will discuss in the introductory last part, that is microplastic in wastewater treatment plant. That is the presence of microplastic in sewage treatment plant, that is the wastewater treatment plant. If you have don't know what is the treatment plant, basically, I just recapitulate this. Wastewater treatment plant are those treatment plants that are typically installed to treat basically wastewater before disposal it into the river or lakes. The objective of this, that is to decrease the pollution load on the river or lakes. So this is the reason we basically install the treatment plants in it. Okay. Next is this wastewater treatment plant also played an important role in our today's topic, that is microplastic. They also played an important role in the removal of microplastic as well. So as we see in the previous picture, here it is. Here we see that how microplastic used in beauty products, toothpaste can be directly discharged into wastewater. Okay. We also see that how thousands of synthetic fibers shed into wastewater during washing process. But the removal efficiency of this wastewater treatment plant, they basically depends on what type of treatment method we are using. That is the treatment method basically depends on how the efficiency of the microplastic removal rate. So it has been also observed that due to that inefficient treatment plant or inefficient efficiency actually, those those uh, microparticles actually could bypass from wastewater treatment plant. So and finally they could accumulate in the environment. So if we don't install a proper treatment mechanism in the wastewater treatment plant for microplastic removal, then it will eventually bypass through it, and eventually there is no benefit from the treatment plant actually. Okay, so the next thing we will discuss is the second part of the topic, that is detection of microplastic in wastewater treatment plant. So the detection process basically consists of three stages, that is the collection and pre-treatment and characterization of microplastic. In collection or sampling stage, we basically learn different methods associated with collection of microplastic from wastewater. In pre-treatment, we basically learn about how to separate out the microplastic from the inorganic and organic impurities in it. And in the last thing, that is characterization of microplastic, here we basically distinguish the chemical composition of the microplastic through microscope, and there is an instrument called spectrophotometer. Okay, that we will learn in the later stage. So first of all, here we mainly firstly see there are four types of sampling or collection method. That is how to collect those microplastic from the environment or from the source or from the wastewater. Okay, so there are typically four types of method for collection. Number one is container, use of container. Collecting microplastic using container, it is the most simple method of collection. It requires less skilled manpower, but only a few liters of wastewater can be collected by containers. So this is a drawback in this method, that is only a few liter can be collected through the container. Hence, it can be only used in the inlet portion, that is in the influent part of the wastewater treatment plant, where the chances of microplastic contamination is more. Okay. The next thing is, next process is that a separate pumping and filtration method. So in separate pumping and filtration method, here we basically, the wastewater is typically pumped from source and eventually passed through a set of sieves. Okay. In this way, the microplastic in wastewater get trapped and used for further detection procedure. Okay. Next, the method for collection is third collection method is surface filtering method. So in surface filtering method, it is another technique where basically which is basically carried out by skimming the water. Here you can see in the figure also, it is basically carried out by skimming the water surface at the end point of the wastewater treatment plant. One of the major advantage of this method is one of the major advantage of this method is the sample volume we basically stored in or we used for testing actually is far more from the above from the previous methods actually. This is one of the advantageous point for this particular method. But it has some also a drawback. This method is only basically applicable to downward elevated stream. So when if that location is not permitted, then we can't allow this method for sampling or collection of microplastic. Okay. Now the last but not least method is auto sampling. Auto sampling, here specific auto sampler is used to collect microplastic automatically at constant volume and time interval from a large container. Okay, so this method is actually costly compared to other methods and also has some limitation in sample volume, but this method requires no manpower actually. Okay, so this is one advantageous point of it. Now coming to the next part of the detection method, that is pre-treatment of microplastic. How we can pre-treat. So in the next stage of detection of microplastic, that is in pre-treatment, we basically required to separate out organic and inorganic matter from microplastic actually. So for removal of organic matter, there is basically three types of method. That is most of it are chemical method actually, chemical reaction. First one is wet peroxidization method, where basically we oxidize it with some oxidant. Next is enzymatic degradation method, and third one is alkaline or acidic method. So firstly, in waste peroxidization method, mostly there are three reagents we used, that is hydrogen peroxide, sodium chlorate, and phenton reagents. Okay, so so among them, the oxidation rate of hydrogen peroxide and sodium chlorate is slower, so they are inefficient for large volume of sample, whereas the phantom reagent breaks down organic matter faster. Okay, so that is the advantage of phantom reagent. Now the another method is enzymatic degradation method. We use here the enzymes like lipase, cellulose, etc. To separate out organic matter from the microplastic. These enzymes can be used in broader aspect to degrade those organic matter which can't be done in wet peroxidization method actually. Okay. The next method for organic matter removal is alkaline treatment and acid treatment. This method is basically faster method than the previous two methods, but with higher concentration of acid or alkali, this can cause damage to the microplastic. So it is recommended that we use low concentration of acid or alkali so that low pH tolerant polymers could survive in this removal process. Okay. Now coming to the next thing, that is removal of inorganic matter. For removal of inorganic matter, we typically use the density separation technique through salt solution. In general, we use sodium chloride solution in this technique as it is cheap and non-toxic. In some cases, higher density salt like sodium iodide or zinc chloride can be used to separate all microplastic in the wastewater. Okay. Now, the last stage of detection method of microplastic is characterization. Firstly, in characterization of microplastic, there are also 4 types of methods we use generally. We usually see first one is the light microscopy. Here in this method, this is simply a microscope basically. We usually see in the biology lab actually. Here we basically magnify things up to 400x. So as a result, we can see size, shape, and color of the microplastic. But one drawback is this: we can't basically know about the chemical composition of microplastic by it. That can be done by the later methods actually. Now, to identify this particular chemical identity of the microplastic, we need the Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy method. Here basically few of the microplastic, as we see here, these microplastic are basically put into the instrument, and light rays are passed through it. Chemical composition, we get different spectrum scenario, and with that we can easily tell the composition of microplastic. Okay. The next method for characterization is micro FTIR or micro Raman spectroscopy method. It is basically a combination of microscope and spectrophotometer. Okay. The previous two methods, those are combined into this third method. Okay. Another method, that is the last one, that is another method is characterization, is gas chromatography with the help of mass spectrometry, with the help of pyrolysis. So typically we have to know what is actually pyrolysis. Now pyrolysis is basically a decomposition process of plastic or solid waste through heating. Okay. So after this pyrolysis, we can take those microplastics to another instrument called as those you can see in this figure. This is called the gas chromatizer. Okay. So in gas chromatizer, this is basically nothing but a mass spectrometer in large scale actually. In the last method, that is in the fourth method, we get the clear spectrum compared to those spectrophotometric methods. So it has basically a better accuracy rate than the other methods. Okay. Now we will quickly discuss about the testing methods. What are the testing methods we actually use in the for detection of microplastic? First one is the dye imaging method, and second one is NOAA method. Among them, dye imaging method is used for relatively clean water, that is water with low amount of organic matter. And another method is NOAA method, which is used for relatively dirty water, that is water with high organic matter content. Although both methods include three basic steps, that is sampling, isolation, and measurement. Okay. Now coming in detail about the dye imaging method. It's not moving. What is the issue? In dye imaging method, we collect sample in beaker or water bottles. Then we have to add Nile red dye in it. Okay. And to incubate it, you have to incubate it for 24 hours. After that, the microplastic appeared like in the figure. Here you can see in this figure. They appear as this. Okay. Now we can basically filtrate those sample in 1.5 micrometer filter, and then inspect through the microscope and spectrophotometer for determination of size, shape, chemical composition, etc. Okay. Next method that I have told, that is NOAA method. In NOAA method, we basically collect sample through surface sampling net. Here you can see the surface sampling net in the second picture. Then we use to separate through particle sieves. Although this separation does not remove actually the organic or inorganic matter. So for that, we need to take help of the oxidation by hydrogen peroxide for removal of organic matter, and also density separation by sodium chloride for removal of inorganic matter. So after pre-treatment, we may inspect microplastic through microscope and spectrophotometer for further identification. Okay. Now, coming to the next part, that is in detection of microplastic, we mainly concerned about two basic properties of microplastic. That is chemical composition and size and shape of microplastic. So it has been is anyone talking? Subhajit, can you mute please? Okay. So it has been observed that there are over 30 types of polymers found as microplastic in effluent and effluent of wastewater treatment plant. The common polymers we basically see are polyester, polyethylene, polyethylene tetrathalate, and polyamide. As you can see, they are majorly found in the wastewater treatment plant, influent and effluent. Okay. Among them, the polyester, polyethylene tetrathalate, and polyamide. Those three polymers basically we can found it. It is used in synthetic clothes fiber. Okay, for making of synthetic clothes. And the last one, that is polyethylene. Polyethylene mainly found in different beauty products, different food packaging, different drinking water bottles. Okay. So apart from that, those four major common polymers, there are certain minor elements as microplastic, which can also be found in the wastewater treatment plant. Here are some examples, that is polypropylene, polystyrene, polyurethane. Okay. So these are the minor elements we can also found in wastewater treatment plant. Now, the other major property we already talked about is the shape and size of the microplastic. These are already actually discussed in the classification of microplastic. Here you can see, according to the standardized size and color sorting system, the microplastic size and shape, and that's all. Okay. Now coming to the last part of the webinar, that is removal of microplastic, how to remove that thing. This actually comprises of conventional sewage treatment plant. Okay. The treatment of wastewater mainly done by the four stages, that is preliminary stage, primary treatment process, secondary, and tertiary treatment process. We are not going into detail of this treatment process. We are mainly concerned about the result, about the removal efficiency of microplastic in those treatment stages. We can see in this flow chart that the amount of microplastic remained after pre-treatment is 41 to 65%, and after secondary treatment, after primary treatment, it is 2 to 50%. After secondary treatment, it is 0.2 to 14%, and lastly, after tertiary treatment, it is actually 0.1 to 2%. So in general, in India, actually, we generally skip the last part, that is the tertiary treatment process. So basically, if we want to remove, but the result here clearly shows that we really need the tertiary treatment process if we need the result 100%. Okay. So we need this tertiary treatment mandatorily for removal of microplastic through wastewater treatment plant. Now coming to the conclusion, that is what are the takeaways from this webinar. We learned what is microplastic, what are the classification of it, how do they affect environment. We learned different detection methods of microplastic, their merits, demerits, different properties of it. We learned different removal methods of microplastic. Through though we see that a lot of research works to be done. There are conventional treatment process, but as such, no microplastic target-based treatment technologies have been developed yet. So a lot of research work to be done on those particular scenarios. Above all, that is, in general, we need to limit usage of our plastic product. If we can eliminate or separate waste at its source, then this will be best solution to prevent microplastic becoming a threat. So for that, we need to do organize. We need to aware people. We need to organize some awareness campaign. We will so that the government should bound to take some serious action about the environmental issues. Okay. So we will end the webinar with a short awareness video for microplastic environment. So let's see. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening and participating in this webinar. If you all have any queries or doubts, you may contact in person. So that's it.
Okay.
I think we have time shortage in 40 minutes to end soon.
Okay. Thank you, Saurabh sir, for
Uh,
the excellent presentation. Okay. So if you have any query from the participant, just for 5 minutes you can ask to our speaker Saurabh sir. Otherwise, after that we will end this session. Okay. So if you have any query, you can ask Saurabh sir personally. Okay. So thank you, Saurabh sir, for joining, and thank you all the participants. So we are ending this session. Okay. So thank you all.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.